The silence was the first thing Dr. Eris Thorne noticed. It wasn't the sterile, machine-humming quiet of deep space he had grown accustomed to, but a profound and absolute stillness that seemed to press in on the hull of the exploration vessel resonance. One moment, they had been enveloped in the chaotic, non-Euclidean vertigo of the Tesseract Drive's first full power jump, a kaleidoscopic storm of light and pressure, and the next, they were suspended in a silence so deep it felt ancient. Eris's job was language, the study of how sentient beings bridge the gaps between minds. But this void was a form of communication all its own, and it spoke of utter desolation. He unstrapped himself from his chair in the linguistics lab, the magnetic clasps releasing with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the tomb-like quiet, and drifted toward the panoramic viewport. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. They were floating in the heart of a celestial nursery, a vast, billowing cloud of incandescent gas and nascent stars known to human astronomers as Kepler's Wreath. Ribbons of magenta and cobalt blue twisted around pillars of cosmic dust, all illuminated from within by the brilliant glare of newborn suns. It was a sight of impossible beauty, one that no human had ever witnessed this close. Yet the awe was instantly eclipsed by a primal, chilling fear. They were not alone. Surrounding them, stretching out in every direction as far as the ship's sensors could penetrate, was a fleet. Not a fleet in any military sense, but a congregation. A silent and motionless gathering of starships so diverse and magnificent it defied imagination. There were vessels that looked like spun crystal, catching the nebula's light in 1,000 glittering facets. Others were biological, resembling colossal, phosphorescent coral reefs or leviathans sleeping in the stellar depths. He recognized the elegant, blade-like cruisers of the Glyptodont Imperium and the geometrically perfect octahedrons of the reclusive silicates. It was a conclave of the galaxy's elder races, the most powerful and ancient civilizations in known space, all gathered here in the celestial cradle of Kepler's Wreath. And every single one of them was dead, not destroyed, but inert, dark. Their power signatures were flat, their communication arrays silent, their hulls cold. They drifted like a ghost armada, a cosmic graveyard of titans. Captain Eva Rostova's voice, usually a calm and steady anchor, crackled over the internal comm with a tremor of restrained urgency. "All hands, report status. Dr. Thorne, I need you on the bridge. Now." Eris pushed off the wall, his stomach lurching as he propelled himself through the corridor. On the bridge, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of terror and disbelief. The main view screen was a mosaic of external sensor readings, each one confirming the impossible thousands of ships, all completely powered down, their crews seemingly in a state of suspended animation. "What have we done?" whispered Alara, the young science officer, her eyes wide as she stared at the data. "Where are we?" Captain Rostova stood ramrod straight, her knuckles white where she gripped the command console. "The question isn't where, Alara. It's when." She turned to Eris, her face grim. "Our Tesseract jump overshot its mark by a lot. According to the star charts, we're in a restricted sector. A forbidden one." Eris pieced it together, fragments of xenopological lore and classified briefings coalescing in his mind. The Great Silence, a mythical ritual, a legend among the younger races like humanity. Once a millennium, the elder races would gather at a sacred location to shed their technological shells and engage in a collective consciousness, a deep meditative communion. During this time, all advanced technology within the consecrated space was said to fail, neutralized by a powerful, nullifying field. It was the holiest of rituals, and to intrude upon it was the greatest sacrilege imaginable. "Captain," Eris said, his voice barely a whisper. "We're not just trespassing. We've stumbled into their cathedral during High Mass." The uniqueness of the resonance was suddenly no longer a source of pride, but a terrifying liability. Like every other ship in the galaxy, this power wasn't drawn from fusion or antimatter. It was powered by a contained quantum singularity, a pinprick of space-time so warped that it operated outside the normal laws of physics. It was the reason their Tesseract drive worked and, horrifyingly, it was the reason their lights were still on while the gods of the galaxy slept around them. The minutes stretched into an hour. They broadcast apologies in every known language, sending hails on every frequency, but it was like shouting into a vacuum. There was no response. The silence remained, oppressive and judgmental. Then, a change. A flicker of light from the largest of the ships. A bioluminescent vessel that resembled a continent-sized, celestial manta ray. It was a Cygnian Ascendancy worldship, a living creature of legend. A soft emerald light began to pulse from deep within its core, a slow, rhythmic beat like a waking heart. With the light came a feeling. It wasn't a sound or a vibration, but a wave of pure, unadulterated dread that washed over the resonance. It pressed against the ship's psionic dampeners, which whined in protest, struggling to hold back the tide. On the bridge, crew members flinched. A navigator cried out, clawing at his temples. Eris felt a cold sweat on his brow as a fleeting image of his childhood home burning filled his mind. It was a psychic echo, a ripple from a consciousness of unimaginable power beginning to stir. Captain Rostova's command cut through the rising panic. "Reinforce the dampener security. Stand down from weapons, do not give them a target." Then, the presence arrived. It wasn't a voice, it was a mind, vast and ancient, crashing into their own with the force of a tidal wave. It was an intelligence that perceived their ship not as a vessel, but as a discordant, screaming noise in a symphony of perfect silence. With it came a singular, overwhelming emotion violation, the pure, righteous fury of a deity whose sanctum had been defiled. "Who dares?" The thought it had was not in words, but in a blast of raw conceptual data that overloaded their minds. Eris fell to his knees, clutching his head as the alien consciousness, the mind of the high ascendant Kalen, began to sift through their thoughts, their memories, their very beings. It was an agonizing, invasive touch, the psychic equivalent of being flayed alive. "We have to answer it," Aris gasped, pushing himself up, his nose bleeding from the psychic pressure. "It's trying to understand what we are." Rostova looked at him, her face pale but her resolve unbroken. "How? It's not listening. It's attacking. Conventional communication is useless," Eris explained, stumbling toward his console. "Its mind operates on a level we can't comprehend with mere language. But the resonance was built for this. The psionic amplifier. We can broadcast a single, pure concept. Not words, not apologies. Just a feeling. An honest feeling." It was the ship's ultimate purpose and its greatest secret. The amplifier could harmonize with the ship's singularity core, taking a focused thought from a trained mind and broadcasting it across space-time. A telepathic signal that could theoretically be understood by any sentient being. It was designed for a peaceful first contact, not to placate an enraged god. It was also incredibly dangerous. A poorly controlled broadcast could cause catastrophic psychic feedback, killing the operator and everyone on the bridge. "What concept?" Rostova demanded, her eyes locked on the pulsing Cygnian ship, which now glowed with furious intensity. The psychic pressure was mounting, the ship's hull groaning as if under physical strain. The minds of the crew were fraying. Eris knew he had only one chance to choose the right idea, something that could cut through the millennia of tradition and rage. An appeal to dominance would be met with annihilation. An apology would be meaningless. It had to be something more fundamental. Truth, Eris said, his resolve hardening. The simple, unvarnished truth of our situation. Rostova stared at him for a long, silent moment. The fate of her crew, and perhaps all of humanity, reflected in her eyes. The psychic scream from Kalen was reaching an unbearable crescendo. She gave a sharp nod. Do it. Eris strapped himself into the amplifier interface chair, a crown of silver filaments descending around his head. The system came online, a low hum that vibrated through his bones, connecting his mind directly to the heart of the ship's singularity. He closed his eyes, shutting out the chaos on the bridge, and focused. He pushed past his own terror, past the invasive presence of Kalen. He reached deep inside himself, gathering not just his own feelings, but the collective bewilderment and fear of the entire crew. He pictured them not as intruders or defilers, but as children who had wandered into a sacred place by accident, unaware of the rules, overwhelmed by the majesty and the terror. He held that single, perfect concept in his mind, the pure, unadulterated feeling of being utterly and hopelessly lost. As Kalen's psychic rage prepared to deliver its final, mind-shattering blow, Eris gave the mental command to broadcast. There was no sound, no flash of light, but across the silent expanse of Kepler's Wreath, a new thought bloomed, a psionic whisper that did not challenge or beg, but simply was. It was the feeling of a child waking in a dark and unfamiliar forest, the sense of accidental transgression mixed with profound vulnerability in the mind of the high ascendant Kalen, a consciousness that had not known uncertainty for 10,000 years. A single, clear, human concept took root. We are lost. The overwhelming wave of psychic fury did not recede or fade. It simply ceased, vanishing in an instant. The crushing pressure on their minds evaporated. The terrifying green glow of the Cygnian worldship dimmed, and into the void. A new silence descended, no longer empty and oppressive, but filled with a vast, ancient, and unnerving sense of absolute attention. The silence that followed was a different beast entirely. The first had been empty, a void. This new silence was full, saturated with the weight of a gaze that was not physical, but psychic. 1,000 unblinking eyes turned inward on the fragile shell of the resonance. On the bridge, the crew picked themselves up, wiping blood from their noses and nursing bruised skulls, their movements slow and tentative, as if waking from a shared nightmare. Captain Rostova was the first to regain her composure, her voice cutting through the daze with the sharp edge of command. Medical to the bridge. Alara, run a full diagnostic on the psionic dampeners and the singularity core. I want to know if that welcome party left any permanent damage. Her eyes found Eric, who was still slumped in the amplifier interface, sweat plastering his dark hair to his forehead. He looked like he'd aged a decade in the last 10 minutes, the experience of channeling the ship's soul having left a deep, psychic exhaustion in its wake. She helped him out of the chair, her grip firm and steadying. Report. Doctor, she said, her tone softening almost imperceptibly. What did you feel? Eris swallowed, his throat dry. It wasn't a mind like ours, Captain. It was a network, a consciousness woven from 1 billion threads over millions of years. When we broadcasted, it was like a single, clear note in a storm of noise. It paused to listen. He looked toward the main view screen, where the colossal, now dormant Cygnian world ship hung in the nebula's glow. It's still listening. It's curious. In the grand scheme of cosmic threats, the focused curiosity of a godlike entity was only marginally better than its rage. They were a novelty, a bacterium under a microscope, and the question of whether they would be dissected or simply observed was now the only one that mattered. An hour passed. Then, too, Rostova ran the crew through silent, methodical drills, a routine designed to impose a sense of order on a situation that was fundamentally beyond their control. They checked systems that didn't need checking and reinforced shields that were already at maximum. It was a human response to the incomprehensible. They made themselves busy. All the while, Eris sat at his station, his eyes closed, trying to parse the faint, residual echoes of Kalen's mind. It was no longer a direct presence, but a faint static at the edge of his perception, like overhearing a conversation in a language he almost understood. He felt impressions of immense time, of galaxies being born and dying, of a profound and unending weariness, and beneath it all, a constant, low thrum of vigilance, a sense of waiting. Then, the signal came. It wasn't a transmission or a hail. It was a change in the light. From the very center of the Cygnian world ship, a filament of the same emerald energy they had seen before extended outward, stretching slowly across the void. It moved with an intelligence, a deliberate grace, until it touched the hull of the resonance. There was no impact, no sound. The filament simply unconnected. On the bridge, every console flared with a soft green light. Alara gasped. "Captain, it's interfacing with us, bypassing our firewalls, our security. It's not hacking us. It's harmonizing. It's reading the ship's core systems." "Is it hostile?" Rostova demanded, her hand hovering over the manual override that would sever their Tesseract drive from the singularity, a last-ditch act of self-destruction. "I don't think so," Eris said, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and academic fascination. The psychic static in his mind was sharpening into a coherent thought, a direct invitation from Kalen. "It wants us to come aboard. It wants a parley." The concept was more complex than that, a layered meaning that implied an exchange, a mutual unveiling. The bridge fell silent, the only sound the faint, alien hum of the Cygnian energy flowing through their systems. The invitation was an order cloaked in the guise of a request. To refuse was unthinkable, to accept could be suicide. Rostova made her decision with the cold pragmatism that had defined her career. "Dr. Thorne, you're with me. Lieutenant Kaido." She addressed her security chief, a stoic man built like a reinforced bulkhead. "You have the third slot. Full environmental suits. Sidearms only. We will not present ourselves as a threat." She turned to her second-in-command. "Commander, you have the bridge. If we are not back in 3 hours, or if you detect any hostile action, you are to engage the Tesseract drive and get the resonance out of here. Do not attempt a rescue. That is an order." There was no argument. The crew understood the stakes. As the three of them suited up in the airlock, Eris felt a tremor of fear that had nothing to do with the psychic alien and everything to do with the tangible reality of stepping off their ship into the heart of the unknown. The Cygnian ship had formed an umbilical of solidified light, creating a shimmering, pressurized tunnel between their airlock and an opening that had dilated in its living hull. Stepping into it was like stepping into a dream. The air inside was warm and humid, smelling of rich soil, ozone, and something else, something ancient and floral. The walls were not metal, but a kind of living, pearlescent tissue, pulsing with a slow, rhythmic light. Veins of the same emerald energy crisscrossed the corridor, which was not built, but grown, its architecture following an organic, a flowing logic that defied human engineering. There were no signs, no doors, no clear pathways, yet they felt a gentle, insistent pull guiding them forward, deeper into the Leviathan. It was Kalen drawing them toward its heart. They walked for what felt like miles through vast, cavernous chambers that contained entire ecosystems. They saw forests of crystalline trees that chimed with soft, musical notes and rivers of viscous, silver fluid that ebbed and flowed with the ship's internal rhythm. The sheer scale of it was disorienting, a testament to a civilization that measured its existence in geologic time. All the while, the psychic presence of Kalen grew stronger, no longer a whisper but a constant, enveloping hum. It was not communicating in thoughts, but in feelings, a deep-seated curiosity, a profound sense of antiquity, and that same persistent undertone of watchful waiting. Finally, their path opened into an immense central chamber, a space so large the far walls were lost in a shimmering haze. The floor was a soft, moss-like substance, and the ceiling was a swirling vortex of emerald light, the ship's core, its mind, and floating in the center of the chamber, suspended by invisible forces, was Kalen. It was not a creature in any recognizable sense. It was a biological superstructure, a living nexus of neural tissue and organic circuitry that resembled a cross between a colossal brain and a banyan tree. Countless luminous tendrils, like roots, spread from its core, connecting to every part of the world ship. A single unified organism the size of a moon. This was the High Ascendant, the mind they had so rudely awakened. As they approached, a new wave of understanding washed over Eris, clearer than before. He translated it for the others, his voice hushed in awe. It understands we are an accident, a new variable. It is not angry anymore. It is concerned. You are loud, Kalen projected, the thought forming directly in their minds. The concept of loud was multi-layered. It meant their technology, their short, chaotic lives, their turbulent emotions. But it also meant something more literal. Your power. The cage star. It sings a dissonant song in the great quiet. A holographic image shimmered into existence before them, formed from the chamber's ambient light. It showed a star map, one that was chillingly different from any human chart. It depicted their galaxy, but at the edges, in the deep voids between the spiral arms, there were dark, menacing shapes. They were not nebulas or star clusters. They were entities, vast and predatory, depicted with a visceral, symbolic language of hunger. What are those? Rostova breathed, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. The reason for the silence, Kalen replied, the psychic impression one of deep, ancestral fear. They hunt in the spaces between. They listen for the songs of civilization, for the noise of technology and complex thought. The louder the song, the faster they come. The truth of the ritual crashed down on Eris with the force of a physical blow. The Great Silence wasn't a religious observance. It was a defense mechanism, a cosmic hiding. Once a millennium, the elder races would gather, power down their mighty civilizations, and enter a state of collective, focused quietude, making the galaxy appear dormant and uninteresting. They were hiding from reapers that hunted on a galactic scale, The holographic map zoomed in on their location, on the tiny, brilliant speck of the resonance. And then it showed a thin, bright line extending from the ship, piercing through the nebula and stretching out into the intergalactic void, straight toward one of the dark, hungry shapes. Your cage star does not sleep, Kalen projected, and the feeling that accompanied the thought was one of pure, cold dread. It sings a song they have not heard in eons. And you have just given them our location. The revelation hung in the vast, living chamber, a silence more profound and terrifying than any that had come before. The truth of their situation was a physical weight, pressing down on the three humans, threatening to crush them under the sheer, galactic scale of their blunder. They were not just trespassers, they were a beacon, a lighthouse beam in an ocean of cosmic predators, and they had just broadcast the location of the galaxy's most sacred hiding place to the monsters in the dark. Lieutenant Kaido, ever the pragmatist, was the first to break the stillness, his voice tight. "How long do we have? Time is not the predator's measure," Kalen projected, the thought laced with an ancient, weary fatalism. "Proximity is. They are drawn to the brightest lights, to the most complex energies. Your singularity is a banquet. They were distant, sleeping. You have woken them. They will come." The holographic star map shifted, the dark shape at the edge of the void pulsing with a malevolent, unseen energy, a faint tendril of influence, invisible to human sensors but terrifyingly real to the Cygnian Ascendant, was already stretching toward their sector. The resonance had rung a dinner bell that could be heard across millions of light years. Captain Rostova's mind, trained to process threats and formulate responses, was already several steps ahead. She looked not at the monstrous shape on the map, but at the being of light and thought before them. "You brought us here for a reason," she stated, her voice devoid of fear, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "Not just to show us the doom we've brought upon you. You want something from us." A wave of complex emotion emanated from Kalen, not surprise, but a deep, resonant respect for the human's quick, logical leap. "Your technology is a curse." It communicated, the thought a mixture of accusation and intrigue, but it is also unique. Your caged star bends the fabric of what is. It creates a space outside of space, a potential we have never encountered. The air shimmered, and a new image formed beside the star map, a perfect, glowing schematic of the resonance's tesseract drive, rendered with an accuracy that suggested Kalen had absorbed the ship's entire technical database in moments. It highlighted the singularity core, the source of their power and their problem. "The great silence is a shield of nothingness," Kalen explained. "We become invisible by ceasing to be, but your vessel, it does not cease. It cannot. The wound in reality it carries is perpetual. It cannot be hidden. Therefore, it must be used." The implication was staggering. Kalen wasn't just demanding they leave. It was proposing an alliance of the most desperate kind. It saw their ship not as a liability, but as a potential weapon. Eris, his mind reeling from the psychic and intellectual overload, found his voice. "A weapon against that." He gestured at the hungry void on the map. "We are an exploration vessel. We have a few defensive phasers. What could we possibly do? It is not your weapons we require." Kalen projected, the image of the tesseract drive glowing brighter. "It is your dissonance, your ability to sing the wrong note, the plan." As Kalen laid it out in a cascade of concepts and images that flooded their minds, was both insane and breathtakingly elegant. The silence was failing. Each cycle, the hunters, the Eterna, as Kalen named them, grew bolder, their senses sharper. The elder race's strategy of hiding was becoming untenable. But the resonance's singularity was a new element, a sound the Eterna had never heard before. Kalen proposed to use the ship not to fight the Eterna, but to lure them, to draw the nearest one into a trap. "We will amplify your song," Kalen explained, showing them images of Signian energy filaments weaving into the resonance's singularity, modulating its output, turning its chaotic broadcast into a focused, irresistible siren call. "You will lead it away from this place, away from the fleets of the elder races. You will lead it into the choke point." The holographic map zoomed in on a treacherous region of space several sectors away, a dense nebula choked with gravitational anomalies and collapsing stars. A ship's graveyard known on human charts as the Serpent's Maw. It was a place no sane captain would ever enter. "The Maw is unstable," Kalen continued. "Its physics are fluid. A precise, resonant burst from your singularity, amplified by our power, could trigger a cascade failure. Localized reality collapse. You would not be destroying the Eterna. You would be unmaking the space it occupies, erasing it from existence." Eris felt a chill run down his spine. It was a plan born of utter desperation. They were being asked to be bait in a cosmic fishing expedition, with a leviathan of unimaginable power on the line. And the final step involved detonating a reality-warping bomb that would likely annihilate them along with their target. "And what happens to my ship and my crew in this localized reality collapse?" Rostova asked, her voice dangerously calm. There was a pause, a moment of psychic hesitation from the ancient being. "The calculations are incomplete," Kalen admitted. "The chance of your survival is minimal." Lieutenant Cato let out a short, harsh laugh. "Minimal. At least it's honest." Rostova's gaze did not waver from the swirling core of Kalen. She was a captain of the Terran Exploration Corps. Her mission was to seek out new life, to expand humanity's understanding of the universe. She had never been trained for this, for a choice that held the fate of ancient galactic civilizations in its balance, but she had been trained to lead, to protect her crew, and to face impossible odds. "Why us?" she asked, the question sharp and to the point. "You are a conclave of the most powerful races in the galaxy. Why risk everything on a single, primitive ship that stumbled in here by mistake?" Kalen's response was the most profound and unsettling thing they had yet experienced. Was a wave of pure, unfiltered memory, a vision shared directly from its eons of existence. They saw the elder races in their prime, building empires that spanned star clusters. They saw them fight wars with weapons that could extinguish suns. And they saw them grow old, complacent, and rigid. Their technology was perfected, their societies calcified, their paths set. They had forgotten how to innovate, how to improvise. They knew how to hide, but they had forgotten how to fight. "You are new," Kalen projected, the thought tinged with something that felt like a mixture of envy and pity. "Your species is still chaotic, unpredictable. You still possess the desperate, reckless spark of a species that believes it can outwit the dark. We have forgotten what that feels like. We have only tradition. We have only the silence." It was a confession of cosmic proportions. The gods of the galaxy were tired. They were trapped by their own perfection, unable to conceive of a new solution to an old threat. And the humans, with their flawed, noisy, and dangerously potent technology, were an anomaly, a wild card in a game that had been played the same way for millions of years. The choice was laid bare before them. They could refuse, and the resonance would likely be destroyed to preserve the silence, a futile gesture against the coming tide. Or they could agree to fly into the heart of a cosmic nightmare, acting as bait for a void-dwelling monster, with a chance of survival so small it was almost a rounding error. But in doing so, they would be giving all the sleeping civilizations around them a chance they would not have otherwise. Rostova looked at Eris, then at Kaito. She saw the fear in their eyes, but she also saw the same steely resolve that was hardening in her own heart. They were human. They didn't know when to quit. "Tell us what you need us to do," Captain Rostova said, and in the heart of the living world ship, a pact was sealed between the newborn and the ancient, a final, desperate gamble against the encroaching dark. The journey back to the resonance through the shimmering, living corridor was a silent one, the weight of their pact pressing down on them more heavily than any planet's gravity. The humid, floral air of the Cygnian world ship now felt cloying, the rhythmic pulse of its internal light like the ticking of a doomsday clock. When they stepped back through the airlock and onto the cold, metal deck of their own vessel, the familiar hum of the ship's life support was a stark reminder of everything they were about to lose. Captain Rostova sealed the inner door and immediately called a shipwide assembly on the bridge. She stood before her crew, a collection of the brightest and bravest humanity had to offer, and in her eyes, they saw not the unflinching commander they knew, but a woman shouldering an impossible burden. With brutal, unvarnished honesty, she laid out the situation, their accidental intrusion, the great silence, the Eterna, and the suicidal bargain she had struck on their behalf. She offered no false hope, no platitudes about their chances. She told them they were the bait, the lure, and that their final destination was a cosmic graveyard from which they would almost certainly not return. A heavy silence descended on the bridge, the same profound quiet they had first encountered, but this time it was filled not with alien dread, but with human contemplation. Then, from the back, Alara, the young science officer, spoke, her voice clear and steady. "When do we start?" "Captain." A murmur of assent rippled through the crew. They were explorers, scientists, and engineers. They had signed up to venture into the unknown, and this was simply the ultimate, final frontier. Their fear was eclipsed by a grim, shared sense of purpose. Humanity may have been the cause of this crisis, but they would also be its solution. The transformation of the resonance began immediately. The emerald filament that had first connected to their ship now thickened, and from it, a dozen more branched out, attaching to the hull like the roots of a great tree. But this was no hostile takeover. It was a symbiosis, a desperate and beautiful fusion of the ancient and the new. Eris stood on the bridge, acting as the translator and conduit for a process that was beyond human engineering. Through his mind, Kalen guided Alara and her team, showing them not with blueprints, but with pure conceptual understanding, how to weave the Cygnian biocircuitry into the very fabric of their ship. Living, crystalline conduits grew through the service corridors, their internal light pulsing in time with the singularity core. They did not replace human technology, but augmented it, creating a hybrid system that was part machine, part organism. The goal was to turn the entire ship into a focused psionic amplifier, with Eris at its center. He spent days in the interface chair, his mind linked with Kalen's, learning to control the chaotic song of their caged star. It was an agonizing process. He had to learn to shape the raw output of a quantum singularity, modulating its reality-warping frequencies into a specific, coherent signal, a call designed to be irresistible to a creature that fed on complex energy. He learned to make the signal sound like a feast, like a wounded and powerful prey, like a beacon of life so vibrant it could not be ignored. The strain was immense, He would emerge from the interface pale and trembling, his mind echoing with the vast, silent patience of Kalen and the chilling, hungry void they were trying to attract. While Eris trained, Rostova and Kaido prepared the ship for its final journey. They plotted a course through the most desolate, empty sectors of space, a path designed to minimize collateral damage and lead the Eterna directly into the Serpent's Maw. All non-essential systems were powered down, all resources diverted to the shields, the engine, and the newly integrated Signian weapon lure. The crew worked with a quiet, focused intensity. There were no tearful goodbyes, no grand speeches. Instead, there were shared moments of quiet camaraderie, a game of chess in the mess hall, the sharing of a treasured photograph of a family back on Earth, a silent nod of mutual respect between two engineers performing a final diagnostic. They were a crew facing the end, and they had chosen to face it with dignity. The day of their departure arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, solemn finality. The last of the Signian filaments detached from the resonance, the upgrades complete. The ship now pulsed with a faint, internal emerald light, its human heart now beating with an alien power. A final thought came from Kalen, a psychic message broadcast not just to Eris, but to every mind on the ship, a wave of profound and ancient gratitude that transcended language. We will not forget. The silence will remember the song you sing today. With that, Captain Rostova gave the order. Helm, take us out. Slow and steady. The resonance pulled away from the ghost fleet of the elder races, leaving the sanctuary of Kepler's Wreath behind. As they slid into the black, empty space between systems, they were truly alone, a single, tiny ship against an infinite darkness. For hours, they flew in silence. Then, Rostova turned to Eris. He looked exhausted but resolute. "Doctor," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's time. Sing your song." Eris nodded, took a deep breath, and settled into the interface. The crown of silver filaments descended, and he closed his eyes, his mind plunging into the violent heart of the singularity. He gathered its power, shaping it with Kalen's teachings, and then he broadcasted it, a single, piercing note of complex, vibrant existence into the void. It was a beacon of life, a defiant shout into the abyss. They waited. The tension on the bridge was a physical thing, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. Minutes stretched into an hour. Then, a quiet beep from Alara's science station. "Captain," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have something, or a lack of something." All eyes turned to her console. She pointed a shaking finger at a section of the long-range sensor display. It was a patch of space several light-years distant, and it was unnaturally black. The cosmic microwave background radiation in that sector is gone. It's a hole, and it's getting bigger. The bridge crew stared at the screen, at the patch of absolute nothingness that was expanding on their display. It wasn't an object moving toward them. It was an absence, a negation of reality itself. A star that had been on their charts moments before, a faint, distant blue dwarf, flickered and vanished, consumed by the spreading emptiness. The Eterna was not a ship. It was not a creature of flesh or energy. It was a moving patch of non-existence, a localized void that erased whatever it touched. And the song of their little ship, their beautiful, dissonant song of life, had drawn its gaze. A cold, clinical terror, far deeper than the psychic rage of Kalen, settled over the bridge. Alara looked up from her console, her face ashen. "Captain," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's coming for us. It's not moving through space. It is the empty space." "Of course." Here is the continuation of the final part, expanded to your requested length. The moment of transition was not a passage, but a becoming. There was no tunnel of light, no pearly gate, only a seamless, instantaneous shift in the fundamental nature of their existence. One moment, they were a crew of flesh and bone aboard a ship of metal and wire, bracing for annihilation in the heart of the serpent's maw. The next, they were something else. They were a unified consciousness, yet they retained the distinct threads of their individual selves. The resonance was no longer a physical vessel. It was a concept, a mobile locus of shared identity that held them together, a lifeboat of coherent thought adrift on an infinite sea of pure potential. This new reality was a place where physics had been replaced by metaphysics, where the building blocks were not atoms, but ideas, memories, and emotions. It was a pre-cosmic space, the quantum foam from which universes were born. Captain Eva Rostova was the first to impose order on the chaos. Her will, which had been the ship's unbending spine, now formed the vessel's conceptual keel. She was the anchor, the gravitational center that kept their individual consciousnesses from simply dissolving into the boundless ocean of thought surrounding them. She felt the pull of that dissolution, a siren song of perfect, mindless peace, the temptation to let go of the struggle of selfhood and merge with the infinite. With a force of command that transcended spoken words, she established the bridge of their new resonance, not a physical room, but a shared mental space where their identities could convene and cohere. Status report. Her thought echoed, not as sound, but as a direct, resonant query within their collective. Dr. Eris Thorne was their eyes and ears. His mind, trained to find the patterns in language, was uniquely suited to interpret this new environment. He was no longer looking at stars or reading energy signatures. He was perceiving the currents of pure information that flowed through the void. He could feel streams of nascent physical laws, eddies of collective archetypes, and vast, slow-moving tides of cosmic memory. The space around us is not empty, Eris projected, his thought tinged with an academic awe that had survived their transformation. It's a nexus of possibilities. Every direction is not a vector, but a different potential outcome. We are floating in the source code of reality. Alara, the science officer, was their hands. Her mind, which once wrestled with quantum mechanics and stellar physics, now began to probe the rules of this new existence. She could reach out with a tendril of thought and touch a flowing concept, the idea of gravity, for instance, and feel its raw, unwritten potential. She learned that by focusing their collective will, they could interact with this sea, creating temporary ripples, small islands of stabilized reality. She managed to manifest a shimmering, translucent representation of their old bridge, a familiar ghost of a home they could no longer touch. It was a comfort, psychological bulwark against the overwhelming abstraction of their surroundings. Lieutenant Kaido, the stoic security chief, was their memory, their conscience. He did not interpret or manipulate this new reality. Instead, he held fast to the memory of what they had been human. He was the repository of their physical sensations, the feeling of solid ground, the warmth of the sun, the sting of a wound. His presence was a constant, grounding reminder of their origins, preventing them from becoming so lost in the conceptual that they forgot the sacrifices that had brought them here. Their first age in this new dimension was spent in silent exploration and adjustment. They learned to navigate not by propulsion, but by consensus. To travel, they simply had to agree, collectively, on a destination, not a place, but an idea. They journeyed through a river of pure mathematics, where numbers were living entities, and watched as the concept of a circle learned to be perfect. They drifted through a vast, silent forest of slumbering archetypes, where the ideas of hero, mother, and monster waited for a universe to call them into being. They were cosmic ghosts, tourists in the engine room of creation. Yet, a sense of purposelessness began to creep into their shared consciousness. They had saved their galaxy, but what now? Were they doomed to drift for eternity? Observers of a process they could not truly join, the temptation to simply let go, to dissolve their vessel of thought and merge with the infinite, grew stronger. It was Eris who found their new purpose. While sifting through the endless currents of potential, he detected something different. It was a structured stream of information, but it felt old, wounded. It was not a nascent idea waiting to be born, but a fading echo of something that had once existed. It was a current of grief. "Captain, I found something." His thought was a sharp, focused beam in their shared mind. A memory, a powerful one. It feels like a scar. Rostova's will gave the order without hesitation. "Take us there." They aligned their collective intent and moved toward the source of the sorrowful current. The journey was different from their previous explorations. As they drew closer, the sea of potential grew darker, thinner. The vibrant, chaotic flow of new ideas was replaced by a profound emptiness, a stillness that reminded them chillingly of the Eterna. This was not the aggressive, consuming void of their enemy. This was a hollow space, an absence left by a great tragedy. They arrived at the source and found a wound in the fabric of potential. It was a pocket of reality where the flow of creation had stopped, a static, silent echo of a universe that had been erased. The resonance drifted into this bubble of cosmic scar tissue. What they found within shattered their understanding of their own sacrifice. Floating in the silence were the psychic ghosts of an entire civilization, the final, fading memories of a people who had met an end identical to the one they had so narrowly averted. They were a race of crystalline beings who communicated through song and light, and their technology had been based on harmonic resonance. They, too, had created a power source of immense complexity, a great crystal that sang a song of pure creation. And that song, like the song of the resonance's singularity, had attracted an Eterna. Eris acted as a psychic archaeologist, carefully touching the fading memories, reading the story of their end. He felt their terror as the silent void consumed their star systems. He felt their desperation as they poured all of their energy, their entire civilization's life force, into their great crystal for one final, defiant song of existence before they were extinguished. They had not had a Kaelin to warn them, no elder races to hide amongst. They had faced the darkness alone, and they had been erased completely. The realization was profound. The Eterna was not a singular entity they had defeated. It was a universal force, a predator that hunted across the multiverse, a form of cosmic entropy that sought out and consumed complex systems. They had not killed the beast. They had merely survived one of its hunters. And in this silent, mournful echo, they were bearing witness to one of its countless other victims. A new emotion coalesced within the crew's shared consciousness, forged from Cato's remembered humanity and Rostova's unyielding resolve, a deep, burning sense of responsibility. They could not save this lost race. They could not turn back time. But they were not powerless. Alara, her mind alight with a daring, impossible idea, began to experiment. She focused the crew's will, drawing on the memory of their own singularity, the echo of the power that had brought them here. They were a reality-warping event given consciousness. Perhaps they could create as well as destroy. Their song, it's still here. Alara projected, her thought, a complex schematic of hope. The core concepts of their existence are imprinted on this echo. Harmony, crystal, light. We can't rebuild their universe, but maybe we can plant a seed. The plan was audacious, a gamble on a cosmic scale. They positioned their conceptual vessel, the resonance, at the heart of the wound. Eris focused on the memory of the crystalline being's final song, not just its melody, but its mathematical and emotional structure. He became a conduit for their entire civilization's legacy. Rostova provided the unwavering intent, the focused will to create. Cato grounded them in the memory of life's value, the moral impetus for their actions, and Alara, guided by their collective purpose, began to weave. She took the echo of their singularity's power and used it as a needle, threading it through the core concepts of the lost civilization. She did not try to build a star or a planet. She aimed for something far more fundamental. She focused all their power into a single, infinitesimal point and instilled within it the fundamental laws of a new potential reality, a reality based on harmonic resonance, on the physics of music and light. For a final, eternal moment, the entire crew poured their being into this single act of creation. They were no longer just a crew, no longer just human. They were a bridge between the lost and the unborn. They felt a tremor, a shift in the fabric of the void. The single point they had created flared, not with light, but with potential. It became a seed, a nascent universe, containing all the core principles of the civilization that had been erased, now free to grow and evolve on its own. A new and different song in a new and different cosmos. The act left them drained, their collective consciousness weary but filled with a profound sense of peace. The wound in potential began to heal, the mournful echo fading as the new seed drifted away into the greater sea of possibilities, beginning its own long journey toward becoming. They had found their purpose. They were not ghosts. They were not prisoners of infinity. They were guardians of echoes, cosmic archivists who could find the scars left behind by the void. They were gardeners at the dawn of time, who could take the memory of a fallen civilization and plant the seeds of its rebirth. Their exploration had a new meaning. They were no longer just seeking the unknown. They were seeking the lost, the forgotten, the erased. Their mission, Rostova realized with a clarity that resonated through them all, was to ensure that no song, once sung, was ever truly silenced. The resonance turned from the healing scar, its own internal light glowing a little brighter, a little warmer, with a unified, silent consensus. They set a new course, not toward an idea or a concept, but toward the faint, distant echo of another lost song, waiting in the infinite darkness to be heard. Their journey was over, and their work had just begun.